Okay, that's great. Hi, I'm Mark Roberts. Welcome to my YouTube station. Hello. Welcome to this foray into kind of clickbaity top 5 type videos. I did a video last week about setting up this little mix room here, doing some acoustic treatment and things like that. So check that out if you want to. You really don't have to. But it got me to thinking about monitoring in general, and I thought I'd share some tips about how you can make your mixes translate more betterer, and I've put them into this WYSI format for you, which actually makes a lot of sense in this context, as I hope you will now see. Number 1, speakers. So your monitors, your speakers are the most important bit of gear in your studio, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. So before you start worrying about all your plugins and your outboard and all that kind of thing, when it comes to mixing, and to a big extent when it comes to tracking as well, your monitoring is of the utmost importance if you want to be able to hear your music properly and make the right decisions when it comes to your mix. We've talked about the environment already in the last video, so let's think about the monitors themselves. And the first thing is pick something within your budget. So don't feel you have to go and take out a credit card to get the best monitors in the world. People mix every day, big mixers mix every day on Yamaha NS10s. There's a whole other philosophy surrounding those in terms of they're very good at translating and things like that. But what I'm getting at is you don't need the most fancy monitors in the world. You need some monitors that are within your price range that you can learn like the back of your hand. Read some reviews and look on some forums, and generally speaking, I think if it's universally agreed that they are good speakers, then you can kind of go for it. In an ideal world, you'll be able to go into a shop or something and take a listen and maybe compare it to some other speakers in the same range, because there is an element of subjectivity with these kind of things. Speakers sound different and people have taste. Someone might really like one set that you're not so keen on. So if you can go and try some stuff out, that's the ideal scenario. But if you can't, just take the plunge on something that's within your price range, or if you want to aim a little bit higher, buy some second-hand ones and you might be able to afford something like the next level up. But whatever you get, accept it and start working on them and learn them. Don't be sort of telling yourself that the reason my mixes aren't good is because of my monitors. So secondly, positioning, and I touched on this in the other video, but it's important to get your monitors in the right position. So we talked about this equilateral triangle. So your monitors should be the same distance apart as they are from your head, essentially, facing at your head. So this makes a triangle, and I like to have them kind of firing just behind my head. And this is really important for your stereo image. So you want things to kind of be symmetrical. It's no use having one speaker off in the corner and one up on a shelf, although you might be able to get used to that eventually, because a large aspect of this is getting used to your speakers and getting used to your room. You're starting off on the back foot, so if at all possible, get them positioned properly. Height wise is the same kind of thing. I mean, it's fairly kind of agreed on that you want your ears to be around the same height as your tweeter, but you know, move them about a bit, see what sounds good to you. But I wouldn't go for any extremes. I wouldn't have them down on the desk, because they're just going to be firing kind of here, and also they're likely to resonate with the desk as well, which is going to throw you off. So if at all possible, on some stands, or if they have to be on some shelves or something, if you can do something to decouple them. I've got these isoacoustics pucks, but you can also get the kind of foam little platforms for them and things like that as well. So get them well positioned, isolated as you can, and at the right height, and yeah, you should be good to go. And then just listen to as much music as you can that you're familiar with, commercial music, and let them sink in, not only in terms of sitting there and academically listening to what they sound like, let it drip into your subconscious a bit as well. So if you're doing other things, emailing, blah blah blah, on social media, stuff like that, you know, just like listen to music, and that on a subconscious level it's just going to get you used to how your speakers sound. Number 2, volume levels. Volume levels. This is so important. This was not only a game changer for me, but this was something I really struggled with when I was starting to learn how to mix. So being kind of self-taught, this was a mistake that I made from the outset, and that is I was monitoring too loud. If you're like me, you like loud music. A lot of people do, because things sound more exciting when they're loud. And there's a few reasons why this isn't a good thing, essentially. So I'm not saying you should never monitor loud, because there's situations like if you're tracking guitar and you're sat with a guitarist, you're not going to want to be monitoring super quiet, because it's not very exciting for them. So that's a situation. Also, perhaps at the beginning of a mix, I might monitor a bit louder, just so that I can kind of get a feel for it. I think at the beginning of a mix, you're kind of getting your tones and you're listening to how everything's sounding and working together. You get a bit more low end information when things are up a bit loud. You can kind of feel the music a bit more. But don't do this for a long time, and turn down to a much quieter level. And another reason why you shouldn't monitor loudly is it's bad for your ears. Prolonged listening at loud volumes, I don't need to tell you really, it's going to damage your hearing long term, and that's not going to make you a better mixer, is it? So yeah, you don't want to be doing that for long levels. Also, it's actually to do with our hearing, like the way the human ear works. When you turn things up louder, our ears kind of essentially compress things, and much like a compressor plug-in or outboard unit, when you compress stuff and limit stuff, it sounds more exciting, and it levels out. So we're sat there trying to adjust the balance of how the instruments are in relation to one another, but we're compressing it, so we're not getting a true representation. So that's another reason to have it a bit quieter. So there's one thing I can say with absolute confidence to you, and I'll fight anyone on this. Yeah. If something sounds really good quiet, it's going to sound amazing loud. It's kind of directly proportional thing. So I don't know if you've ever got into the car and turned it on and you've left the stereo on and it takes your face off, and you know that volume was the volume at which you were listening to the music when you left the car, and that's because you've been driving and the volume creeps up and your ears just become more and more accustomed to it. So this was the trap I was falling into with my monitoring. So like I said, it didn't matter how much I read about people monitoring quietly and how it had yielded better results. The volume would creep up throughout the day as I was mixing, because I was, I don't know, trying to make it more exciting or whatever. But this is a false hope. You know, you're making things more exciting by turning them up. They're not actually getting any more exciting. So it wasn't until I really kind of disciplined myself, and I literally put a bit of red tape on the volume knob. I did my louder listen, got things kind of working, and then when I got into the more critical stage of the mix, I turned it down and got it to a sensible level. Now, a method you could do with this is to actually use a decibel meter. Okay, so I've got one on my phone and it's called dB meter. It's a free app, and just make sure that you're at a decent volume level. So the kind of widely recommended volume level for monitoring is 85 decibels. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One being, this is supposed to be the volume at which the human ear is the most flat. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Fletcher-Munson curve. Is the kind of frequency response of our ears, and 85 dB is supposed to be the most accurate in that way. Also, it's a volume you can listen at for quite prolonged amounts of time without damaging your hearing, and you don't really have to get that much louder before prolonged amounts of periods of time. Prolonged amounts of periods of time will actually damage your hearing. So if you're within that 85 decibel constraint, then you're good to go. So yeah, turn it down, put a bit of tape or something on your volume knob, or take your knob off completely, take your knob off, and just stick at that until you either finish the mix or you're done for the day. I actually monitor quieter than that. I find when I'm doing balancing and stuff, I like to monitor it more between 60 and 70, and I think it just allows me to work for long periods of time. And honestly, I find every time when you turn that up at the end of the day, when you're downing tools and you just give yourself a victory listen, you'll be surprised at how good that sounds. You just have to work a little bit harder to get the results. Again, going back to this thing of if it sounds good quiet, it's going to sound great loud. So you're working to really make things sound exciting at that level, and the results will speak for themselves. Number 3, referencing. These tips are designed to help you make your mixes translate better onto other systems. So what better way than to listen to them on other systems? It's the old adage of the car test. If you have a car, if you drive a car, listen in the car. If you've got some headphones, listen to them there, on your phone, on your laptop speakers, all that kind of thing is going to be beneficial. Make sure these are things that you're familiar with. There's no use listening to your mix in someone else's car and making some sweeping judgments about it if you've never heard that system before. So you might have a set of headphones that you listen to all the time on the way to work or something. Might just be the earbuds that came with your phone. It doesn't matter really. It's about knowing what music should sound like on those things. So when I'm mixing, I do 90% on my monitors, but I also have some headphones as well. I have these DT770s here. These are, largely used for tracking and things like that, but they're good for just having another perspective, and I'm pretty used to how these sound. My good buddy Tim Rokins at Hell Yeah Mastering, who does 99% of my mastering, has a set of these on his desk all the time, and these are great because having something you're used to, but also if you're in a less than ideal room, which most of us are, you're always going to get a low end response on headphones. So you can always check your low end, even if it's hard to judge in your room. I've got, and I'm not just showing off, but I do have some nicer headphones as well. These are Sennheiser HD 600s, and the difference with these are, apart from the price tag, is they're open back headphones, and they're obviously, these are designed for mixing. They're slightly nicer sounding, and the open back thing, these wouldn't be great for tracking vocals or something because the sound escapes. They wouldn't be great for using on the bus because you piss everyone off, but they're supposed to be more like listening to speakers. So yeah, just personally I check through on these, and often on the DT770s as well. So it's good to have some different things to reference on, but don't get carried away with this. Choose one, maybe two things to listen on, and just get really familiar with these systems. Number 4, referencing. Again, yeah, you heard. It's a different kind of referencing this time though. I'm talking now about referencing other tracks, other people's music. This is something you'll intuitively do anyway. We're always going to compare ourselves to other people, but there's some kind of things to bear in mind when you're referencing and choosing what tracks to reference and why. So you're going to get references sometimes when you're doing a mix for someone else, and they give you their reference tracks, like, this is a band we like, this is what we want our record to sound like. The danger with that, I suppose, is that you'll get caught up in trying to literally make it sound like them, copy a guitar sound, copy a whatever. But the way I think referencing should be used is more to do with feel and balance. So you might have, I don't know, some people, including myself to some extent, build up a a range of tracks that they use for referencing. So you might find there's a particular track you just love the sound of when it comes to rock music, say. You might have another track that you know the low end is perfect on this track, and if you can try and get your low end in the ballpark, even if it's a very different sounding band, it's just a good thing to kind of refresh your ears, because that's kind of what this referencing is about. People will often have a list of reference material, and it's good to sort of maybe have yourself a little Spotify playlist or something like that, which is what I do if I go into a new studio and I'm not familiar with the system. I'll just flick through some tracks. It might be a couple that I've mixed, or it might be that combined with some commercial stuff that I'm just really familiar with, some favourites or whatever. Also, you could import them into your DAW, so you could then literally listen whilst you're doing the session. And there's even some plugins that can help you with that as well. I've got one called Metric AB by Plugin Alliance, and that's really great. I mean, it's really comprehensive as well. It's got analyzers in it and all kinds of things. But one particularly good feature with that one is you can load in a few tracks and it will match the RMS volume level. So when you're flicking between the commercial track, which is a mastered track, and your mix, you get a much fairer representation. So that's really good. A couple of things with this referencing thing. Try not to get disheartened, I suppose, is one thing. When you're comparing yourself to other people, you are you, they are someone else. You're at the stage you're at, and you need to embrace that. So try to avoid any feelings of kind of jealousy. Try and harness that into something that's going to push you forward and reach your goals. Remember that these tracks are mastered, so there's inherently going to be a bit of a difference in sound, which leads me on to another reference you can do. Part 2, part B, no, what are we on? 4B, okay, is to strap a limiter or a limiter and a compressor on your master bus, and every now and then just listen to how your mix sounds with the limiter on it, and try and volume match that as well, so you're listening to a true representation of what the limiter's doing. And this will give you an idea of how your track's going to react to the mastering process, and it can be surprising sometimes. You might put this limiter on and suddenly your snare's too loud or something like that, vocals too loud, vocals too quiet. Just see how it reacts. And you can also use this to, when you're A-Bing between commercial tracks, you can A-B between a kind of pseudo master that you've done and the commercial release, and that's a bit of a more fair comparison. Number 5, ear brakes. So loosely I've called this segment of the video ear brakes. What I want to talk about is the phenomena known as tunnel vision, but it should be called something to do with ears, tunnel listening, I don't know. But basically, when you're mixing, much like when we were talking about the car thing, turning your car on and the music being way too loud, you get used to things when you're mixing, and this is a real easy pitfall to fall into. So ear brakes are really important. Not working too long, recognizing when you're tired. It can be a 5-minute break. I'm not talking about breaking up your whole day, but I like to just, if I'm feeling like I'm starting to make poor decisions, or if I'm doing things arbitrarily without kind of having an actual reason to do them, this is a good point to go and make a cup of tea, check some emails. Personally, I like leaving the room. I think getting out of the room and listening to something else, even if it's not music, just talking to someone, letting your ears kind of reset is really important. But if you're not doing that, then just even listening to another bit of music, or just having a little bit of peace and quiet and then going back to it, is a very useful exercise. And this is always this point when you go back to it with fresh ears, so to speak, that's when you're going to notice the things that have perhaps been staring you in the face that you've just got used to. So this is a point to have a pen and paper at hand, or somewhere that you can quickly write down your observations, because immediately you're going to notice, oh, my bloody kick drum's too loud, or something like that. So yeah, ear breaks, really important. Another technique that you can use is actually using someone else. There's two ways you can use other people. The first way is just sending a mix to someone and getting some feedback. I'm sure that's something that most of you have done. So this could be someone that's slightly further along the journey than you, that you trust in terms of like an audio mixing type person. I've done this. People send me their mixes sometimes, and it's really useful to get some feedback. So that's a really, really good thing to do sometimes. And again, they'll probably notice something, and as soon as they say it to you, be like, oh yeah, because you've got this tunnel vision and you've just got used to the snare being too loud or whatever it is. Equally, I think playing it to someone who's not musically trained or technically minded is just as valid, maybe even more valid, because you play it to some nerd like me and they're going to start talking about your reverb or something, whereas someone else might have just a more pure emotional reaction to the music, and they can tell you about the chorus needs to be more exciting or something like that, or they might pick up on technical stuff that you didn't expect them to. So try that as well. Finally, another technique, well no, actually on that same tip, listening with someone else is a really good one, and it's kind of freaky because it's like you're listening through their ears. And I find this a lot when I'm getting a band round to do like a final sign off on a mix. For some reason, when you're sat with someone, because I think you automatically put yourself in their position, you hear what's wrong with the mix straight away. So yeah, just getting someone to come in and being like, so when you're playing it to your friend or whatever, if you can be there, that can be a really good thing as well, because you'll pick up on some stuff. Last thing I'm going to talk about on this one is just a technique of listening from outside the room. This is not a new technique, but it's one that I still do and I find useful. For some reason, it helps you hear the balance really well being outside the room. You can do this either when you're having a break, or you need to go and do something, just leave your speakers on and listen from another room. But you can be more analytical as well if you want to. With all these things, well, this is a technique I'll use if I'm listening back to a mix before deciding it's done. But it's a good one to do with this outside of the room technique, is just listening and putting yourself in the position of each member of the band. If it's not a band, then listening to each element of the music and thinking of it from that point of view. So I'll go and have a listen as the bass player and see if I can, pa-ting, got a message. I'll go and listen as the bass player and be like, right, if I was the bass player, can I hear everything? Blah, blah, blah. Same with the drums, same with the guitar, same with the vocals. Okay, so that's another good one. Try it out. Lovely stuff. I hope that was a useful video, and I really enjoyed the format. I hope you did too. These are things that I wish someone had. The reason I'm doing these videos isn't just for my own health in some way. This is stuff that I wish someone had hammered home to me years ago, because it's learned over time. I'm not the first person to say these things, but hopefully I've put them into some kind of format where you can try out some of these things, or maybe they just cement them in your mind and they're there already, but it's kind of a nice reminder. My next video, I'm going to do a mix breakdown of Delta Sleep. Fancy that. Had a couple of people ask me to do it, and they've kindly agreed to let us have a poke around in the mix. So hopefully that'll be interesting, and leave some comments if there's anything specific you want to know about on that. If you're watching this video in the future, two things. One, positive, awesome, you can go and watch the video already if it interests you. Two, negative, there's no point commenting on this one because it's already been done. Okay, bye, see you later.